We commence at Puleo City Hall, where a train arrives at dusk, as someone calls out for their handler. Then, we observe a lady in a sapphire gown inquiring about her handler's worries. The fellow states that Haijing is returning tomorrow, and he believes the union with Xiaolan will be cancelled. The young woman settles on his knee and says, Xiaolan wouldn't let him live. But the leader is concerned about the child. With a sly grin, she asserts, the young man is a complete nobody, and with a prize on him, is essentially doomed. At this, the leader mentions that individuals from the Huan realm are also seeking the lotus, and they possess influential alliances. The woman soothes him, speaking of the commander of the Zhong syndicate, calling him a fool who merely freeloads off his father. She then assures, as soon as our protagonist enters that train, his destiny will be sealed. We witness the platform, and someone yells our main character's moniker. We then notice a magenta-haired lass gesturing with her arm raised to get his focus. Beside our lad is his fair-haired comrade, who's praising the young dame, calling her his fiancée. Our young fellow then teases his comrade about his preference for vintage items, like these promotional displays. Our fellow tosses a toothpick, and it lands precisely in a waste receptacle many yards distant. Amazed, the fair-haired comrade asks, "How did you accomplish it?" Our fellow draws nearer, saying, "It's all about the state of mind." He gives his comrade a cunning sideways glance. The lass approaches and asks if they've been imbibing, and the comrade answers that they just went for some grilled food. The fair-haired fellow asks our protagonist to phone him when he reaches the lodging, and our young man questions the reason. With a smile, he explains that he also consumed a lot and requires a prompt to utilize the restroom. Our fellow shoves him and asks if Lucial Allen would simply allow him to soil himself. At that, the comrade draws the lass nearer, remarking that she slumbers soundly and wouldn't even observe. He continues, stating she wouldn't awaken even if the train were to leave its tracks. Hearing this, our protagonist is astonished and places a hand to his brow, appearing as though he's sensing something. Abruptly, his irises flash crimson, and he seems to be experiencing a sudden distress. He has a premonition of a structure collapsing, as his ailment appears to intensify. Just then, a broadcast calls for travelers of train 1160, and the fair-haired fellow declares, "That's my signal." Despite the fact that he's feeling unwell, our young man bids farewell to his comrade and instructs him to be careful. The pair then departs, with the comrade gesturing back as a parting. The fair-haired fellow turns with a solemn expression and also tells the hero to look after himself. Once they are farther away, the lass inquires, why did he ask Li Banfang to call him? He explains that his comrade has a psychological ailment, and since he drank excessively, he became concerned. With a smirk, the fair-haired comrade adds, Banfang isn't mentally unstable. Meanwhile, the woman on the leader's knee ponders if the lotus wouldn't be lost if Jing were to be eliminated. She then discloses that Xiaolan is already aware of his companion, Li Banfang, who knows the whereabouts of the artifact. The whiskered gentleman is surprised by this and finds the young man's moniker quite intriguing. The woman reassures him and guarantees that after he divulges the location of the lotus, the boy will be dealt with. We arrive at the college lodging with our protagonist grumbling that the illumination was extinguished prematurely. Walking unaccompanied in the gloom, he laments being the sole one remaining there due to his condition. Our young man reflects that, unlike his comrade, he lacks a dwelling to return to. Suddenly, he experiences another premonition and witnesses his comrade submerged in Emerald Inferno, pleading for rescue. The image of the locomotive resurfaces in his mind alongside several faces of desperate cries. Attributing fault to his comrade's jest, he grasps his device, resolved to make contact and rouse him. He is on the line, instructing Jing to awaken and proceed to Puluo. A bewildered voice on the other end inquires about the location, and our fellow observes some movement within his sleeping quarters. Startled, he beholds his fair-haired comrade reclining there and promptly disconnects the call. He advances towards the fellow, rousing him and demanding to know his identity and why he occupies his sleeping area. The apparition of the structure engulfed in verdant flames reappears to torment our protagonist, causing him to falter. He then surveys the sleeping quarters and discerns his comrade Jing lying there with some markings on his person. Our young man is bewildered, as he had just called his comrade who ought to be aboard a train bound for Pulu. Grasping nothing, he retrieves his device to attempt another communication. This time, the call fails, and a notification states the number is presently inaccessible. Our protagonist endeavors to rouse his fair-haired comrade, agitating him vigorously. He notes his comrade's countenance is exceedingly pallid, and his respiration is remarkably feeble. Observing the predicament, he comprehends the necessity of summoning medical assistance with utmost celerity. But as he seizes his device, he perceives a communication from Jing, imploring our young man to effect his salvation. The vision of his comrade soliciting aid flashes back into his consciousness alongside the discourse concerning the train's derailment. His pupils intensify to a violet hue, and he ponders who dispatched the message if his comrade is presently before him. Our fellow conveys his comrade to the medical facility. He is conversing with his comrade's relative. With a cordial expression, the comrade's relative extends a satchel and expresses gratitude to our protagonist for attending to his nephew. Our young man declines the parcel, but the man persists, asserting the youngster requires the funds presently. The uncle then remarks that our fellow has not slept for 2 days and dispatches him home to obtain some repose. With that, our protagonist turns and exits the hospital, appearing utterly depleted. In solitude, he retrieves his device and observes another communication from the supposed comrade soliciting salvation. The subsequent message corroborates the individual's appellation as hijacking, leaving our young man perplexed. Annoyed, our protagonist presumes it to be a deceit and is on the verge of contacting law enforcement, but someone calls his designation. Abruptly, a gentleman materializes, displaying a badge, and our fellow is taken aback to encounter the constabulary. The officer introduces himself as Chen Chongfang and instructs our protagonist to compose himself. The officer inquires if he was the one who transported his comrade to the hospital. Our young man affirms and elaborates that he initially conveyed the pair to the railway terminal. He proceeds with his narrative, stating that he returned to his abode subsequently and discovered him insensible in his sleeping quarters. Our fellow then reflects that the journey consumes 2 hours and has no comprehension of how his comrade returned so swiftly. The officer then questions if our young man experienced any altercations with his comrade and alludes to his psychological disposition. Irritated, our protagonist denies being deranged and asserts his comrade's companion can attest to his blamelessness. With a mistrustful gaze, the law enforcement official probes how the fellow returned to the dormitory if he utilized the train. Our young man responds that he is unaware and suggests he question the lass, as she was with his comrade. At this, the peacekeeper inquires about the specific train, and our fellow states he has no clue. Suddenly, a recollection surfaces, and he recalls the train's designation was 1160. The officer discloses that this train experienced a derailment and plunged from a precipice with no survivors identified. Astonished, our protagonist immobilizes at the report of the mishap and the absence of survivors. He then realizes that if the lass was aboard the train, it implies she too might be gone. Memories resurface, and he questions whether his comrade was aware of the mishap or if his companion was deceiving him. The official approaches him, jolting him from his contemplation and inquiring about his thoughts. Startled, our young man recalls the peculiar communication he received from the supposed comrade at that juncture. He is uncertain whether to disclose the message to the official, as he would be unable to articulate the circumstances. Chen then observes the portable device and inquires if anyone attempted to contact him, but our protagonist remains silent. The official bids farewell and instructs our fellow to reach out if he recalls any significant information. The official clasps our young man's hand and states he must cooperate and refrain from departing the locale. Outside, our fellow is absorbed in contemplation while the official observes him from an upper window. Presently, a woman approaches Chen and inquires if he procured our protagonist's communication logs. She informs him that he only contacted emergency services and the academy, with no other transmissions recorded. The captain opines that it is not that records are absent, but rather that they cannot be traced. The assistant reveals that our young man is an orphan and has been investigated for self-defense on multiple occasions. A depiction on a tablet displays our fellow incapacitating 5 individuals single-handedly, and the official expresses astonishment. With a smile, Captain Chen remarks that this youngster is indeed reckless for undertaking such an action. She opines that our protagonist possesses knowledge and requests that she have someone shadow him closely to monitor him. Chen states that one operative is already occupied observing our young man's comrade's relative. Pondering, the official concludes that engaging with our protagonist will prove to be a formidable endeavor. We observe the interior of a subterranean transit carriage in which our fellow is present. He reflects on the communication he received, and abruptly another alert appears on his device from the constabulary official. Our young man comprehends instantly that the official attempted to ensnare him with that textual dispatch. Then another message from the supposed comrade arrives, stating not to trust them and furnishing a location. Our young man responds to the message and inquires about their identity. The response declares that his uncle, the constabulary official, and the comrade in the medical facility are all deceivers. At that instant, he experiences another vision of his comrade being assailed by phantoms while vociferating about deceivers. Arriving at the institution of higher learning, our fellow receives another message and ponders its origin. He perceives that the individual is privy to information regarding the uncle, the constabulary, and even the comrade in the medical facility. Surveying his surroundings, our young man senses that he is being observed at every turn. The message continues with intimate details that only the two of them would know concerning their fellowship. With this, our protagonist peruses further recollections and confirms that it is the genuine hijacking. Our young man inquires about his whereabouts, but his comrade states the train is on the verge of departure and requests assistance. His companion then implores our fellow to retrieve an object and convey it to his domicile with urgency. Our protagonist asks about the object's location, and his comrade replies that it is at the campus emporium. He then requests our protagonist to transport the article to his native place, as the train departs in the afternoon. Within the bazaar, the comrade explains that the item is situated in a compartment, and he need not unlock it. Abruptly, the locker scans our young man's countenance to his utter astonishment. At this, the aperture opens, leaving our fellow bewildered as to the mechanism of its operation. Within the compartment, he discovers a folded outer garment and retrieves it, grasping nothing. Departing the vicinity, our protagonist transmits a message indicating he is being pursued, and his comrade states he cannot prevail against the individual. His companion instructs him to approach the pursuer to attempt to overhear his vocal transmission. Our young man then discerns the man reporting to his captain that he retrieved an item from the repository. The individual on the telephone declares he attempted to apprise Captain Chen, but was unable to establish contact. Suddenly, the superior issues a directive to terminate our fellow, and the man is taken aback by the command. Our protagonist overhears the word terminate and freezes in apprehension at the menace. Concealed, he ponders what transgression warranted such an abrupt death decree. The operative questions the directive, but his commander asserts the article is perilous and could endanger numerous individuals. On the other end of the communication, the superior reminds the man of his parental figures to compel his compliance. With no alternative, the fellow assents and receives the ultimate instruction to conceal our protagonist's remains. Perceiving this, our protagonist hurls an object to divert him and flees the vicinity. With his hands emitting a verdant luminescence, the man recovers and declares he will not permit his escape. The operative executes a superhuman bound to overtake our fleeing young man. Apprehensive, our fellow glances back and wonders if that pursuer possesses any semblance of humanity. The man draws near with haste and exclaims, inquiring where our protagonist imagines he is headed. He awkwardly evades the operative's thrust. The operative then threatens him, commanding him to relinquish the pack or dire consequences will ensue. The operative questions why our young man merits such treatment. With a sigh, our fellow concedes the predicament, recognizing he cannot recede. His irises emanate a glow, and with a smile, he resolves to witness this absurdity to its conclusion. Then he propels some piquant crisps towards the operative. The comestible strikes the operative directly in the ocular organs, and he cries out in agony from the zesty condiment. Our protagonist seizes the opportune moment for evasion and sprints towards the railway terminal. Without retrospective glances, he rushes through the entrance, endeavoring to elude his pursuer. Within, the operative reports that he has lost the quarry and suggests sealing the terminal to apprehend him. On the other end of the line, the commander becomes incensed and denounces the fellow as incompetent. The superior then instructs the man not to cause a disturbance and to prevent any discovery of the operation. In his study, the commander divulges his scheme to eliminate the operative upon retrieval of the article. Concurrently, our young man receives a pass for train 1160, and his comrade informs him it is operational once more. He requests Bay 96, and the message directs him to Assembly Area 2. While in flight, his comrade advises him to utilize a subterranean passage situated adjacent to the lavatories. Entering the dimly lit area, our fellow questions if the illumination fixtures are malfunctioning and employs his mobile device for illumination. Abruptly, azure electrical discharges permeate the surroundings, startling our fellow. Notwithstanding the alarm, he discerns the egress just ahead and continues down the steps to facilitate his escape. Upon reaching the summit, he emerges from the somber conduit and is immobilized by the spectacle before him. The contemporary terminal has vanished, and in its stead stands an antiquated locomotive accompanied by individuals from a bygone epoch. On the portable device, our fellow complains that the train offers no culinary provisions, and his comrade laments his forgetfulness regarding that matter. His comrade explains it was an emergency, and at that instant, an elderly woman approaches him. The woman then offers to vend him preserved sustenance, which is precisely what our young man desires for his hunger. He ups to purchase 10 cartons, but the custodians endeavor to confiscate the elderly woman's wares, asserting their illegality. Annoyed, our protagonist snatches the receptacle from the custodian's grasp and inquires if this constitutes a form of pillage. He informs the custodians that she is his relation, who merely came to deliver him a repast for the journey. Our fellow then remits payment to the woman for the noodles and states his necessity to board, as the train is poised for departure. With the carton beneath his arm, he gestures to the woman as he enters the train carriage. The elderly woman observes his departure with a benevolent gaze and extends her well wishes for a secure passage. However, as soon as she turns to depart, a clandestine individual materializes directly behind her. Captain Xiao commands his operative to dispatch the suspect and cautions that this represents his final opportunity. Dungpa advances with his emerald energy, but he reflects that this is the opportunity Captain Chen afforded him. Nevertheless, a hand impedes his continued assault, grasping his shoulder with firmness. To his astonishment, it is Captain Chen who advises the young man against haste and to maintain composure. Captain Shirao becomes vexed and states, "Our protagonist absconded with a significant artifact, and we must apprehend him presently." Captain Chen offers a smile and bids Shirao to proceed, as he will remain there with his operative. In his internal monologue, Chen reveals that our protagonist has acquired the item known as the Lucky Star and is consequently endowed with extraordinary fortune. Dungpa is taken aback to realize his superior has dispatched him to his demise. Even cognizant of the perils, Se declares he is uncertain about the Lucky Star, but the article is paramount, and someone must assume the risk. Captain Chen then abruptly concludes the exchange and suggests they permit the object to follow its predetermined course. He remarks that the journey represents a perilous undertaking for our young man, but Xiao appears indifferent. Chen then expresses a wish for the Lucky Star to safeguard our fellow, yet fears he will be transformed upon his return. Meanwhile, our protagonist boards train 1160 and observes several regulations for the passengers. Within his opulent compartment, our young man collapses onto the divan, utterly fatigued after the protracted pursuit. Shortly thereafter, he receives a communication from his comrade advising him to adhere to all train protocols. Our protagonist inquires about the prevailing circumstances, and his comrade explains he is confined and can only converse in person. He then asks about the parcel, but his comrade evades the question and instructs him to rest, acknowledging his arduous day. Our fellow surmises the item to be a valuable, yet recalls hearing it was exceedingly hazardous. Abruptly, a resonant pounding on the portal startles our young man, who immediately assumes a state of high alert. A voice from beyond implores him to open the door and permit the individual entry for a mere moment. Our young man ponders how the woman ascertained his male gender, as he has not exited the chamber. The voice outside persists in its entreaty for the occupant within to open the portal. Suddenly, another voice suggests forcing the door open, as it is evident he will not comply. The door handle begins to turn, while the individual outside insists on his opening it. Our protagonist recalls the regulation pertaining to the prohibition of admitting strangers and wonders about their intentions. A conductor materializes and instructs the individuals to disembark from the train, which instills a sense of relief in our fellow. The commotion ceases, and the compartment reverts to complete silence. Our protagonist scratches the nape of his neck and surmises they were merely vagrants attempting to travel without remuneration. The train commences its movement, and our young man finally reposes on the divan, believing himself to be secure. However, a peculiar, slender hand appears at his chamber's window. It is the aforementioned woman, now situated outside the moving train, imploring to be admitted. Astonished, our fellow questions whether these individuals have lost their faculties, being present on the train's roof. Shortly thereafter, several figures manifest and commence a vigorous assault on the glass. Our protagonist is bewildered by the spectacle as an unusual green aura envelops him. Abruptly, his neck begins to itch intensely, and he senses an internal pressure, as if something is striving to erupt from within. With excruciating agony, 2 shadowy appendages, adorned with demonic visages, burst forth from his back, emanating a verdant aura. Utterly disoriented by the turn of events, Our fellow questions the nature of the transformations occurring within his body. He then perceives two voices within his consciousness and ponders the tri-headed entity he observed externally. Suddenly, the appendages on his back begin to articulate and implore him to grant them entry without delay. At that juncture, a conductor's voice reverberates throughout the carriage, announcing, "This is his designated stop for disembarkation." Outside, the conductor confronts the entities who refuse to depart. The train employee then employs a cudgel to propel the monsters, who are vociferating their desire to proceed to the subsequent terminus. With a direct impact, he strikes the creature squarely, which pleads not to be ejected. Disregarding the entreaties, the conductor forcefully ejects the monster a considerable distance. Within the compartment, our young man regains his composure from the shock, and an announcement declares the train has departed from Sunucha. Our fellow then touches his neck, feeling a laceration, and recalls the sensation of possessing three heads. He begins to speculate that Santocha is a locale that induces transformations and cannot comprehend why the train would halt there. At this, he questions whether it impacts all individuals and what the entity implied regarding a merchant's departure. With this in consideration, he retrieves his mobile device to seek intelligence regarding train 1160. Yearning for explanations, the investigative outcome leaves our protagonist utterly astounded and suddenly afflicted with a chill. It transpires that no data exists concerning the train, nor even the mishap he witnessed. He cannot fathom how such a substantial incident failed to garner media attention, and presumes Chen was merely toying with him. The subsequent day, the train arrives at Hailing Station, and our young man awakens to a vendor positioned outside. The vendor's silhouette drifts past the window, and our protagonist experiences an immediate surge of voracious appetite. Yearning for the infused eggs, he rises and proceeds towards the window to draw back the drape, but halts, recalling the admonition against unveiling the apertures and fearing the entities might still be lurking. Abandoning the notion, our fellow resolves to consume the preserved sustenance he procured from the elderly woman the preceding day. While partaking, he ascertains that his mobile device lacks reception and contemplates the current state of his comrade Jing. Dispelling the apprehension, he decides to concentrate on his repast and imbibes all the noodle broth to satiate his craving. Contented, our protagonist relaxes in his seat and muses that he has never encountered such delectable preserved provisions. Abruptly, he realizes he has consumed an entire portion of noodles and remains profoundly famished. In desperation, our young man surveys the container of noodles, as the hunger he experiences is simply unendurable. Without hesitation, he grasps another receptacle of noodles and fractures it in half to consume the uncooked contents. He can bear it no longer and commences devouring the dry noodles directly from the packaging, exhibiting no concern. Our protagonist feels as though 100 appendages are emerging from his pharynx, reaching for additional sustenance. As he partakes, an announcement informs that the train has departed. And at that moment, a notification materializes on his device. With a satiated stomach, our young man comprehends that the hunger has subsided and ponders if it is due to their leaving the hatchling. Examining the container, he is shocked to observe that he has consumed 8 receptacles of noodles without his awareness. Abruptly, a potent wave of nausea overwhelms him, and he rushes to the side, feeling as though he is about to disgorge everything. After recovering, he rests his head on the table and notices the notification that had arrived on his device. The message was from Jaking, who transmitted his address and requested our protagonist to proceed directly there on the morrow. Our fellow then responds by inquiring about his dwelling and the reason for the presence of individuals with 3 heads. But upon investigation, he discovers that no information exists regarding these locales, and even the cartographic representation on his device is vacant. Time progresses, and soon twilight descends, casting darkness upon the panorama outside. Our protagonist reposes on the divan but is apprehensive because his comrade has yet to respond to his communication. Just then, the train decelerates abruptly, propelling him forward, and he wonders if they have already reached the terminus. An announcement informs that the train has halted due to an issue and requests all passengers to remain within their carriages. He then attempts to activate the illumination, but the switch proves ineffectual as the electrical supply to the carriage has been severed. Thinking swiftly, our young man retrieves his device to utilize the illuminating function and seizes the opportunity to procure his charging apparatus. He then connects the device to the receptacle, requiring to replenish the battery with utmost celerity. But to his dismay, the apparatus fails to charge, and he comprehends that the